It was a cold, moonless night in the small town of Ashwood, nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains. The kind of night where shadows seemed to breathe, stretching unnaturally across the cracked pavement. Everyone in town knew better than to wander out after sunset, but on this particular evening, an old man named Walter Briggs found himself breaking the unspoken rule. Walter was the town's only locksmith, and he had received an urgent call from a frantic woman named Clara. Her front door lock had jammed, leaving her and her young daughter Sophie vulnerable in the chilling darkness. Feeling a pang of guilt at the thought of leaving them helpless, Walter grabbed his tools and set out. Clara's house was on the outskirts of Ashwood, right where the dense forest began. The road to her place was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the cold wind. Walter couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, but he brushed it off. After all, the woods were teeming with wildlife. When he arrived, Clara greeted him at the door, her face pale and her hands trembling.
"Thank you for coming,"
she whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. Walter noticed Sophie peeking out from behind her mother, clutching a worn-out teddy bear.
"Don't worry,"
Walter said with a reassuring smile.
"I'll have this fixed in no time."
As he worked on the lock, he couldn't help but notice the strange atmosphere in the house. The air felt heavy, and the walls seemed to absorb the light from his lantern. Sophie kept staring at the hallway leading to the back of the house, her wide eyes filled with fear.
"What's wrong, sweetheart?"
Walter asked, trying to sound cheerful.
"She's watching us,"
Sophie whispered.
"Who's watching us?"
Walter asked. But the little girl only shook her head and tightened her grip on the teddy bear. Clara's face grew even paler.
She has these dreams.
She explained hesitantly.
Sometimes she says things that don't make sense. Just ignore her."
Walter nodded, but unease gnawed at him. He finished fixing the lock and tested it a few times to make sure it worked perfectly. As he packed up his tools, he noticed a strange symbol etched into the wood near the doorframe. It was faint, almost invisible unless you were looking closely. It resembled a spiral with jagged edges, surrounded by tiny scratches that could have been letters in some ancient language.
"Did you carve this?"
Walter asked, pointing at the symbol. Clara's eyes widened.
"No,
She said quickly.
it's always been there. I think it's just part of the house's old charm."
But her voice wavered. As Walter prepared to leave, Sophie tugged at his sleeve.
"Don't go.
She pleaded.
She'll get you if you leave."
"Sophie!"
Clara snapped, pulling her daughter away.
"That's enough."
Walter chuckled nervously.
"I'll be fine, kiddo. You two stay safe now."
He stepped outside, but the moment he closed the door behind him, the temperature seemed to drop even further. His breath puffed out in visible clouds as he walked to his truck. The woods were utterly silent, and that feeling of being watched returned, stronger than before. As he reached for the driver's side door, he froze. A figure stood at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the faint glow of his truck's headlights. It was a woman, her hair long and tangled, her face obscured by shadows. She didn't move, didn't make a sound. She just stood there, staring.
"Hello?
Walter called out, his voice trembling.
Do you need help?"
The woman tilted her head, and Walter's heart nearly stopped. Her eyes glinted with an unnatural light and her mouth twisted into a wide, unsettling grin. Then she raised her hand and pointed directly at him. Panicking, Walter jumped into his truck and slammed the door. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the engine roared to life, and he sped down the road, glancing in the rearview mirror. The woman was gone. By the time he reached his house, Walter's nerves were frayed. He locked every door and window, double-checking each one. As he sat in his living room trying to calm down, he heard it, a soft tapping at the front door. He froze. The tapping continued, slow and deliberate. Summoning what little courage he had left, Walter approached the door and peered through the peephole. No one was there. But as he turned away, he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. The same jagged spiral symbol had been carved into the wood of his front door, fresh and deep. And then, from somewhere deep inside the house, he heard Sophie's voice.
She's here.